Good afternoon, all, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Vanessa Prodman, and I'm Deputy Director for Research and Innovation at Oase. I'm very pleased to moderate this webinar today. It's the second in a series of 4 webinars on universities and the future of scholarly publishing. Before we go into, let's say, the core topic of today, I just wanted to give you an outline. So as I said, this is a webinar within a series. So we just had one a week ago, and then we will have 2 more in June. The last one in June is for Oase members only. And again, now, before we go into the core of that, actually, we were interested in knowing who are our attendees, our audience. And so I would like to invite you to go on menti.com, so www.menti.com, and to use the code 6568 6960. Join us there. I'll repeat this. So www.menti.com. The code is 6568 6960. And now I will share my screen so that we can get there. You will have the first question. Okay. So I hope you see my slides. So I would like to know where you're from, where you're working. Are you coming from universities and research performing organizations, research funding organizations, publishers, either commercial publishers or non-commercial publishers? Are you policymakers? Are you other? I have to say that we did not really have an open text to specify what other may be. So I see that you are, most of you come from the university sector, higher education institutions. I'll just wait for another minute or so. To give you the opportunity to indicate where you're from, what is your area of activity. Okay. So thank you very much for this. And the next one will be for our colleagues working in the academic sector only. So yeah, it's still coming in, but I think we get that like a huge majority of you come from the university sector, which is very good. So now I turn to the next question, and this is for our colleagues working at universities. Are you representing the leadership? Are you rectors, vice rectors, directors and heads of research support departments, directors and heads of library? Are you research support staff? Are you library support staff? Are you academic staff? And that includes professors, assistant professors, early career researchers. That includes, of course, doctoral candidates as well as postdocs. And so here we see that the majority of the colleagues from the university sector comes from the library departments in general. That's very good. So thank you very much for voting. This is important for us to know who is interested in this webinar. I'll stop this now and I will stop sharing. Thank you very much. And now I go back to my slides. Okay. So the focus today, as I said, it's the second out of 4. The focus today is to discuss and explore the diverse roles of universities in supporting open access. There are many ways universities can do so. It can be via university press, infrastructure, scholar-led publishing, and so we will explore some of those with concrete examples from our panel today. And again, the idea of this entire webinar series, the 4 of them, they stem from, or they are connected to a study published by EUA a year ago, the Read and Publish study. And the objective was the following. We really wanted to analyze the dynamics within the scholarly publishing system in a situation where the system is moving and changing a lot with those transitional or transformative agreements, the read and publish or the publish and read agreements. And we wanted to investigate the short-term, long-term implications and of that scenario, the publish and read scenario, but also alternative scenarios. And this is what we will be addressing today. And those scenarios are the following. So in the Read and Publish study, you had a first scenario, which was kind of the baseline, the standard, as we knew or still know in some cases. This is the scenario number 1, subscription-based contracts with delayed open access through repositories after publishing. So that's the classical or the green route. Then the second one was on what we call transitional or transformative agreements, publish and read or read and publish contracts. This will be the object of the next webinar on the 8th of June. And then we had two future-oriented scenarios that are open access platforms, and they are either owned by publishers or by the community, institutions, and so on. And this is the focus of the webinar today. The properties of this scenario, so the scenario we will call it scenario 4, is that, well, first and foremost, it's open access publishing. And of course, they are. It's published on platforms that are community-owned through repositories that can be, as I said, institutional repositories or national repositories or community-led repositories, archives, different kinds of infrastructures. Publishing is free for authors, and reading is free. So you have immediate open access, no embargo. Another feature of this scenario is that the setup, the maintenance, and the funding costs are covered by institutions, research communities, or research funders. And another feature, which is like an important one if we consider the changes in the system, is that publishers in that scenario would become publishing service providers. So, and those services could even be decentralized, decoupled. So you could have like the peer reviewing processes, the search engines, the editing, formatting, layout, the dissemination, those are different kinds of services that will be provided by third-party commercial service providers. So this scenario is a scenario we can call a more radical future scenario, because you would not have any journal publishing anymore, in a way. And now I invite you to go back to the menti.com. I hope I should have invited you to keep the window open. So if you did close it, please go back to www.menti.com, code 6568 6960. And I will again share my screen so that you can see the next question to you. So in this scenario, the open access scenario, where communities, institutions own the platforms, we would like you to indicate the strengths, to rank the strengths. I ordered them in a random order, and I would be interested in seeing what you think. So we only have one person. So let me remind you, www.menti.com, code is 6568 6960. And again, we would like to know what is of most important in terms of the benefits, the strengths we can get out of that open access, community-owned platform scenario. And of course, the idea will be to check your ranking against, or not against, but and compare it with the ranking from the Read and Publish study report. Okay. Thank you for ranking this. I give like another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll move to the next question. Okay. Seems to have a stable result here, where the most important advantage here is that the academic community is in control of publishing. Thank you very much. Let's move to the next question. Seems I can't get to the next. Okay. And I see that you already, we already have the weaknesses now. So please now vote and rank the weaknesses of that community-owned platform scenario, open access. So is the main challenge for you something related to the transition? Is it about the governance? Is it about the setup? Is it about the money? Is it about quality assurance, resistance? Okay. So it seems that resistance from authors and publishers go first, and then the transition challenges in general, and the setup. Okay. So thank you very much for voting. I will now close this, stop sharing, and go back to the slides where we will see, we'll compare this to the results. So if you remember, you voted as the main, let's say, opportunity and the best option, the best strength, let's say, of this scenario. You mentioned that the academic community would regain or gain or remain in control of publishing, which was the case already by the respondents. So I have to say that the respondents of the Read and Publish study were respondents from representing the different actors in the system. So not only universities, not only authors, but also publishers, research funding organizations. So it was the entire ecosystem and representatives from the entire ecosystems who took part in the study as respondents. And so what they considered most important is that academia is in control of the scientific output, publishing, so very much like what you mentioned, and in the idea, like it would in turn lead to reduced publishing or less of a publishing oligopoly, more a control over the costs, and a more transparent system overall. Of course, immediate open access, but that's kind of like the basic feature of that scenario. So that was considered as a strong strength. In terms of the weaknesses, you mentioned resistance from authors and publishers, and that was the first one that was mentioned as well by the respondents. And then what we see is that they see this scenario as highly desirable for the future, but at the same time, there are questions as to its feasibility. And most important challenges that were mentioned concerned governance, setting up the new structure, the financial viability of the setting. So these will have to be taken or will have to be accommodated and addressed in general. So overall, if we go back to the entire, like the objective of the study and the main results is that respondents considered transformative deals as transitional. So it's leading or in the, let's say it's in the intermediary phase on a journey towards open access, but it's not an end point. On the long term, there is a future in open access platforms. And then there are two scenarios where the most desirable is the community-owned one, the one that we will discuss today. But there are some questions as to the feasibility of this one. And with this, I will thank you for your attention, and I will introduce our first panelist for today. So Vanessa Prodman, and here she is. Thank you very much, Vanessa. So I will introduce you to our audience. So Vanessa is the director of Spark Europe, where she's working to make open access, open data, and open education the default in Europe. She has 20 years international experience working with many leading university libraries in Europe and worldwide. She also added information and IT at the UN-affiliated International Research Institution in Vienna for 10 years. In addition, she's also been program and project manager to Europeania.eu. And now I turn to Vanessa. I will put your slides on, Vanessa, and she will tell you all about in the context of today's topic on the Diamond open access ecosystem. So here
thank you.
We go.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation to speak about OA Diamond Publishing. And what I mean by that is OA free for readers and authors. And this really is true journal publishing. So this is a very extensive, important journal publishing sector, which many authors are unaware of, which many universities have already been investing in. And it's really important for that to be sustained going forward, because I think we can all agree also by listening to Vincent and looking at the report that the current publishing system is really not healthy or sustainable as we see it today. So what I would like to see is a really thriving, equitable, more equitable, connected, innovative and scholar-led publishing ecosystem. So this is the vision for the future. We're not quite there, but if you look at all of these wonderful, the biodiversity and all of the different flowers blooming, the different elements of the ecosystem working well together, I think that's where we need to go. And for us to take back control of our scholarly outputs. So I'm going to report on the Diamond Oase study. I've only got 10 minutes, so bear with me. This Diamond Oase study was to understand the landscape and also to look at the sustainability of it going forward. Funded by Science Europe for Coalition S, and it was led by Operas, and Spark Europe was one of the key partners. We recently published the results, and we have the data published, but we also have the findings in a large report, and also a separate document, the recommendations, to be found here. And I think they're also in the handout. So if you haven't already seen those, please take a look. So just in summary, we have a really wide archipelago of relatively small journals serving diverse communities in numerous languages. We estimate it as about 29,000 journals worldwide. Many of those journals are funded by universities or national governments, but the readership is mainly outside the journal's country. We also see that there are about 356,000 articles, we estimate, published in the OA Diamond sector as opposed to APC. So there's really a huge output there. It's not insignificant. We also have 38% of OA Diamond journals are more multilingual than the APC-based ones. And just to give you an overview of who are some of the bigger actors, or at least the respondents from our survey, we have France, Spain, Italy, Brazil, USA, Croatia we have with us today. Speaking on the panel, Jadranka, UK, Colombia, Portugal is also with us today, and Germany. So they are some of the big actors in this space, at least based on our survey results. Also the disciplines, it's no surprise to see that the social sciences and the humanities from the survey are the largest contributors in this space, but also in the science sector and medicine, and also the multidisciplinary sector. Who owns the journal? Here you see by a long shot it's universities who are really investing in scholarly communication of their authors, their disciplines. We also wanted to test what's the confidence rating of the OA Diamond Journal publishing model. So first of all, almost all of the OA Diamond journals went OA Diamond when they went online. There were very few who moved away. we did ask them, do you consider moving away from OA Diamond? So 72% said they would not, so they are satisfied with the model. But we did have 20% either saying perhaps or yes, and some of the reasons for that was their concerns about the financial viability going forward, or about the journal impact factor. So these were perceptions, not necessarily truths, but concerns. But what about the challenges for the operations of some of these journals? So for many, we saw a strong dependence on volunteers. So 60% depending on volunteers and 87% of those with a medium to high reliance on volunteers. That can be seen as both a strength and a weakness. There's also a lack of coordination and shared services. So for example, many of them are using software systems like OJS, but they're all running on a range of different platforms. So there's inefficiency there in the space because there are so many working independently from one another at the moment. Indexation is by far the biggest challenge. So visible in the search engines, in the spaces where other researchers are searching. And also the lack of preservation facilities. For some, there were some challenges with peer review processes, but I think all publishers have that challenge to grapple with. And there are some also who had a lack of anti-plagiarism software. So that also has to do with the resources available. So some of our recommendations from the report, that institutions and societies develop more partnerships where you federate and collaborate rather than centralize. So really trying to build some of that technical, editorial and administrative capacity to fill some of those gaps that I just talked about. And using and developing more shared services. So we are seeing some national community-led publishing platforms, so working more together with such, but also with other larger infrastructures like Redilic in South America or others. So it's really joining forces. It doesn't have to be on a very huge level, but really working together to address common challenges. And then also to reflect on the role of volunteers, because that is a risk to the system. And also, are you rewarding all of those volunteers who are upholding this really important sector? But how do they actually make this happen? So how do under what economic circumstances are they working? How costly is it? Well, it's really interesting to see. And even in countries, some of the countries with high GNPs, they are running on less than 10,000 euros per year. Just think of what we are funding for APCs, 3 or 4, 5 APCs, and you are covering the costs of one of these journals per year, right? So these are really very small investments to make. Also, the size of paid staff for journal editing and operational work. Over 75% run under 2 FTEs. So again, really running on a low flame. We also asked them, the journals, about their financial status, about their health, their perception, but also based on data. Fortunately, there was a break even for 43%. However, there was a 25% loss made, and there were 31% who reported unknown. And I saw that from the study, there was what I think one of the advantages was more transparency. Well, not all of the costs are, we think also from our study, are being recorded because there is a lot of in-kind contributions, a lot of volunteering, and not all departments know about all of the costs made. So that's another recommendation. But still, so there is really some further support to be done here. And I think our recommendations going forward then to sustain and fund this strategy is to, for universities, research funders, societies, and others, libraries as part of those, to collaborate on national and international funding strategies. We put down 5 years so that it's not just an ad hoc push for the next year or so, but really consistently looking at how can you fund the operations and not just the development of some of these platforms, systems, journals, infrastructures, shared services. And where you also agree on funding principles and selection criteria. So really thinking about why should we fund what, and sharing lessons on how to fund. So looking at what universities can do, and research funders, for example, and looking at a range of different models. What's really key is to fund operations, and many universities have been doing so. So it's important to continue to fund journals and their infrastructures, but more consistently, and following a funding strategy to avoid, as I say, the ad hoc of the good willing, if you like. And also not forgetting the shared services and infrastructures so that we can really connect up those many journals and bring more efficiency into the system and to solve some of those problems more rapidly together. And we need to invest in the future. So to help journals meet industry standards, increase the visibility, because the visibility of OA Diamond, and that this is a tangible, strong alternative to the current subscription publishing offering, and also to increase the technical quality, because of course so many of these small journals are running on low flames. If we join up together and invest in some of those shared services or infrastructure, that can benefit many. I also want to show this slide, which is a bit saddening. Here you see on the left, you see in blue that over the years between the years 2014 to 2019, APC-based journals are on the increase, but you are seeing that OA Diamond is decreasing. There could be a number of reasons for that, but it could also be the push for APC-based journals, and also the move of some of the larger publishers encouraging some of the scholar-led publishers to join them, and then we then thereby lose control of our scholar-led publishing. So I'd like to appeal to you that we take heed and take note of this this concern. So the ask is really to sustain and increase support. It can be in kind, but also financial support for a healthier and thriving, connected, innovative, and scholar-led publishing ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, indeed. And now it's my pleasure to call Kathleen Shearer. So again, I will show this so that you can see her name. So Kathleen is the executive director of COAR, which is the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. And COAR is an international association of repository initiatives with over 150 members from 50 countries. COAR is advancing innovative and sustainable models for scholarly publishing based on the distributed network of repositories around the globe. It's very relevant because we were just mentioning infrastructures. And Kathleen has been working in the area of open access, open science, scholarly communication, and research data management for over 15 years. She's also a research associate with the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, CAL. And so, as I said, Kathleen will now tell you more about community infrastructures for publishing. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vinciane. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, pretty well, thanks.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And I'd just like to mention I'm also here with my colleague, Eloy Rodriguez, who's the core chairman, and he'll be here to flag any comments or questions you have as I have to leave at the top of the hour. And what I'm going to say is very much aligned with a lot of the things that Vinciane and Vanessa have said earlier. I think it's clear that the current mainstream system for scholarly publishing, which is increasingly shaped and controlled by a few large commercial publishers, is not really serving the needs of research or society. And the shortcomings are very well known and include, long delays from submission to publication, high costs for both publications through subscriptions and now for APCs, too much focus on the article as the final research output, lack of transparency in peer review, and significant biases towards the global north. And this concentration in the publishing industry has also contributed to, we saw it in Vanessa's slide, a steady decline in diversity, what we now know are as bibliodiversity. And this bibliodiversity is fundamental for a healthy scholarly communication ecosystem. Epistemic pluralism, which enables us to better solve problems, requires a diversity of workflows, languages, publication outputs, and research topics. So to continue with Vanessa's analogy with biodiversity, we can kind of equate scholarly publishing, with a tropical rainforest that's being steadily cut down and replanted by only 1 or 2 crops. But what we really want is to nurture a system that supports the flow of knowledge internationally, but also enables diversity to thrive. And this is really not happening right now. Things are going in the opposite direction, and take, for example, the recent purchase of ProQuest by Clarivate. So community-based services and infrastructures are critical for addressing this problem. Community-based publishing is mission-driven, governed by the scholarly community, and therefore much more aligned with the values of science and society. And that's why most community-based open access platforms or journals are diamond publishers. They don't charge APCs, and they recognize that APCs introduce unacceptable barriers for many researchers. But unfortunately, because of the way the current market is structured through increasingly big deal license consortium that are forced to buy larger and larger packages every negotiation period, a greater portion of our available funds is being directed towards those large commercial publishers. And this leaves less and less funding for smaller, community-based, localized services and infrastructures, essentially squeezing them out. So the main challenge, or one of the main challenges as I see it, related to community-based publishing is developing robust funding mechanisms that do not employ pay for access or pay to publish models. And this is really challenging. We need to intentionally set aside funds for community-based initiatives and look for ways to better support them financially, and also encourage the use of shared infrastructures like AirUD in Canada, Cielo, Redalyc in Latin America, the Open Library of Humanities, and so on. So at CORE, we're promoting a solution that essentially decouples the functions of scholarly publishing. It involves moving to a publish, then review approach. The idea is that articles are first made available through an open access repository or a preprint server, and then reviewed by an external review service or overlay journal. eLife actually has recently announced that it will move exclusively to this model in July 2021. And I'd just like to quote from their announcement. We welcome this moment and the long-awaited opportunity it provides to replace the traditional review then publish model developed in the age of the printing press with a publish then review model optimized for the age of the internet. So this is about innovation, and there has been very little innovation in scholarly publishing in the last 350 years. The publish then review model addresses a number of the issues I discussed at the beginning, including the time constraints around submission to publication because content is made immediately available. But it also addresses the issue of financial sustainability because it distributes the costs of publishing across organizations. So the preservation and access functions of publishing can be provided by institutions that maintain the repositories. The peer review can be done by review services, which rely on researchers as volunteers usually, even in the case of commercial publishing mostly. And the journals can provide the certification or endorsement. And this approach really has been gaining traction over the last year with the COVID-19 pandemic, where the speed of sharing research outputs has been critical. And this approach also can be used to support reviewing of other types of content, such as research data and so on. So moving away from the primary focus on journal articles. In January, CORE launched the Notify project, which is developing a common technical model and standard protocols to support communications between preprint servers, repositories, and peer review services and overlay journals using linked data notifications. And this will really allow this model to scale up. So it will mean moving beyond a one-to-one communication to one-to-many communication across any compatible service in the ecosystem. So just to conclude, the pandemic has shown that rapid and open sharing of research outputs is possible. So let's use this opportunity to innovate and to create a more equitable, sustainable, and inclusive system for scholarly communications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. So now I will invite our next panelists, and I call Birgitz Schmidt to join me. Birgitz Schmidt serves as head of the Knowledge Commons unit at the Göttingen State and University Library, where she coordinates projects and activities. Yes, here you are, with a focus on policies, infrastructures, and training. And that is all in support of the implementation of open science. Birgit co-chairs working groups on research data management from the Association of European Research Libraries and the Research Data Alliance. And she contributes to international committees. Previously, Birgit Schmidt acted as scientific manager of the European Open Air Project and as executive director of COAR. Birgit, now you will, I think, address the audience with what can university libraries do in support of to support open access publishing, and the floor is yours. Thanks. But I can't hear you. I don't know if it's the same for others.
Yes, there's no sound indeed.
Now you're muted. Now you're not. But I can't hear you.
Birgit, I think the best would be if you actually log out and in again, because I don't think the system recognizes your headphones.
Okay, can I then, I'm going back in. Jadranka, would you be willing to shift? Would that be a problem? No, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Thank you very much. So change of plans. This is like what happens. That's live events. So now I'm very pleased to invite Professor Jadranka Stojanovski. Jadranka is an associate professor at the Department for Information Sciences at the University of Zadar, and she's research librarian at the, and apologies in advance for the pronunciation, the Ruder Boskovic Institute in Zagreb. Jadranka is also executive member of the Oase, the research infrastructure supporting open scholarly communication in the social sciences and humanities in the European research area. Jadranka also serves as Croatian national point of reference on scientific information at the European Commission. And today, Jadranka Stoyanovsky will address two aspects, let's say, because she has many different hats. She will tell us more on the national and institutional infrastructures for open access publishing, and she will have a focus on what the Oase can do in the, well, in terms of to help and support open access in social sciences and humanities. Birgit, I apologize, but then we turn on to Jadranka.
Just trying my sound. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but
good.
Now I shifted, so we will listen to Jadranka first. Thanks. Thank you very much, Jadranka. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation and opportunity to present what we are doing in Croatia and what are main activities inside Opera's communities. So I think that Croatia is a very good example how relatively small academic community can build, develop and share infrastructure supporting open access and open science agenda in the absence of appropriate national policies. We started to build open access infrastructure quite early in 1996 and continue with different information services on research projects, research instruments funded by public money and Croatian researchers. Our latest infrastructure is DABAR, Digital Academic Archives and Repositories, launched in 2015, which today provides support for 150 institutional repositories. Almost all academic and research institutions in Croatia are sharing this platform free of charge, and at the same time developing this infrastructure and improving it. Currently, we are developing a national CRIS system, which will in the future, I hope very soon, integrate already existing information services in one highly interoperable and open information system, which will provide all information related to the research in Croatia. But it is very important to mention that scholarly publishing in Croatia has quite a long history and at the same time very peculiar history. So most journals are published and funded by the universities and learned societies. And there are no big commercial players active in the field of journal publishing. Also, Croatian Ministry of Science and Education is subsidizing approximately 160, 170 scholarly journals. And some limited funding is secured via print subscriptions. But in Croatia, there have never been real market forces at play in the field of scholarly journal publishing, contrary to the book publishing industry, where some commercial publishers are playing the role. Speaking about national infrastructure for open access publishing, the most important national infrastructure is HRČAK. HRČAK, hamster in English, is Central Repository of Croatian Scientific and Professional Open Access Journals, and at the present offers access to more than 500 journals, and 300 of which are scientific peer-reviewed journals. More than half of the journals are in the field of social sciences and humanities. And also, most of the journals are in Croatian language, but significant number of journals are also published in English and other European languages. HRČAK which was government funded in the first 3 years of its production. It's now regular activity of the University of Zagreb University Computing Center. And most of the journals are diamond journals, no charging authors, and only 5% of the journals have APC-based business model. Several Croatian universities also started their own publishing platforms for books, journals, and conference proceedings. Two most important ones, which I will mention, but still very small ones, are More Press by University of Zadar and FF Open Press by University of Zagreb, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. University of Zadar, this is interesting that More Press is somehow consequence of the strategic commitment of the University of Zadar to support open science agenda. And More Press was developed for publishing scholarly books, edited volumes, and journals. And so far, 50 books, 10 journals, the yearbook of the University of Zadar, and University Journal Antenna have been published on More Press. Most of the books are written in Croatian, but there are also publications in English and other European languages. And it's interesting to mention that some scholarly journals are published bilingually. Some are in Croatian only and some are in English only. Respecting high ethical standards related to publishing, University of Zadar has adopted a code of ethics for authors, editors, and reviewers. And FF Open Press was very recently established in 2019, and its collaboration of Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences Press and the library. That's important to mention that the library is very included in the development of this publishing platform. It uses PKP, Open Monograph Press, and publish around 30 books titles per year. The strongest motive for open access in Croatia is actually increase the visibility and expanding readership, both for national and international audiences. In the future, more effort will be directed to increasing reach and visibility with inclusion of metadata in open directories and indexing services, enhancing online functionalities, introducing new formats. We would like to see scholarly publishing system beyond PDF, adjusting workflows for e-only titles. So still a lot of journals and books are still in Croatia published also in print. And our main challenges are dealing with copyright, which is really sometimes huge problem when digitizing older multi-author titles, publishing old maps, photographs, and often it's not clear who is a rights holder. And of course, finding financial support for open access publications and publishing platform development. In Croatia, there are no open access dedicated book subsidies. So development so far was in-kind contribution of the institution. So that was about basic facts about infrastructure in Croatia. And I will shortly present you Opera's community. So Operas is European research infrastructure dedicated to open scholarly communication in the social sciences and humanities. And by open scholarly communications, we are not focused only on publishing process as the most visible part, but on all segments of the research process, in line with open science, which encompasses unhindered access to scientific publications and data from public research and collaborative research enabled by ICT tools and incentives. At the present, Operas gathers 56 organizations from 70 countries, but it's growing continuously, and it's led by 10 members of the Executive Assembly and coordinated by Open Edition and Humanum from France. It's important to mention that Opera's mission is to coordinate and federate resources in Europe to address SSH researchers' needs in scholarly communication. And our vision is to make open science reality and to build scholarly communication systems for the benefit of researchers, students, and the whole society in Europe. Not only in Europe, but in the whole world without any barriers. If you imagine the world in which communities of researchers across the globe are fully enabled to share, discover, and work together, that's what we want to achieve in Opera's community. Only in Europe, Opera's activities are impacting more than 500,000 SSH researchers. Opera supports sustainability and development through collaborative and coordinated efforts of all stakeholders relevant to scholarly communication in SSH, researchers in their different roles as authors, reviewers, editors, translators, publishers and other service providers, research performing organizations, galleries, libraries, archives, museum sector, institution, and funders, and research infrastructure and e-infrastructure. And the issues that are in the focus are bibliodiversity, multilingualism, innovative practices in scholarly communication, innovative inform, business models, use of research data, etc. And I will end with the notion that Operas is quite a complex environment, catering different types of publishers, various services developed by Operas and others, different business models, different policies, and different initiatives. In Operas, we support diversities present in the SSH area. We are learning and growing through them.
Thank you very, very much, Jadranka, also for having addressed those two aspects and taken your different hats. Thank you so much. Now I turn to Birgitz Schmidt. So I introduced her rapidly before, just a few words to remind you that Birgit is head of the Knowledge Commons unit at the Göttingen State and University Library, where she coordinates projects and activities with a focus on policies, e-infrastructures, and training, and this all in the context of implementing open science. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, second try.
Yes, we hear you very well.
Good. So thank you again for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak to you from the institutional perspective. So in Göttingen, we engage in promoting open science, obviously, and the unit I work in was a part of the electronic publishing department. And we have, of course, still collaboration. So I know the operations of the publishing unit pretty well, and also contributed to building up the University Press, which was started in 2003. So us, the publishing landscape is, of course, a very dynamic one, and we look at this from both the library perspective as well as from the perspective of hosting a small publishing house, which basically focuses on publishing monographs, editions, serials, and proceedings, and a few journals over the last decades also turned to us, and we have engaged in providing advice and co-publish one journal at the moment, and also are mentioned as advisors by others. So in that sense, it's rather small scale in terms of journal publishing, but of course this is a diamond journal. And for us, I mean, I was also asked to comment on our engagement in collaborations like the Oase library, which started in 2008, 2009, where we met in the context of the Frankfurt Book Fair, and then developed a project. So it was a 2-year project, and there came other funding along, which you see it's still active and it's growing. So for us, it's both this being involved in promoting open science, open access, but also providing infrastructure services. And the university press, of course, builds on these infrastructures. So they use the institutional repository for publishing books and a link up to larger infrastructures like the Oase Library, obviously, and Directory of Open Access Books, but also infrastructures like open air aggregators from different perspective, be it from the publishing perspective or be it from the perspective of making outputs of funded research visible, or other purposes where funders require bringing together these collections from the monitoring perspective. So in Germany, you have a landscape of quite a few such small publishing houses embedded in libraries, which is good. So there is also collaboration across the libraries. We have a German language, German-speaking presses working group, but we also are members of the Association of University Presses in Europe. And so we always try to combine this drive of saying we have joint policies, basically, in terms of what is the aim and in terms of the quality of the publishing. So peer review processes are something which is always made much more explicit over the last decade, when you have these infrastructures which bring outputs together on a platform, but also the licensing part, or stepping into services which are often not available when the publishing house starts on its own. So, for example, through the HERMEOS project, my colleagues were active in adding additional functionalities like annotation or persistent identifiers, and also trying other things which then might not be fully implemented. But it's always, when you step into this collaboration, some ground for testing and discussing with editors and authors if they would like to see this as a functionality on a platform. So sometimes it's also that you decide against it because it's only a pilot, and then it's a question of how much resources you would like to commit in long term. The same holds for when you create a first journal. It's not clear for us how much we can scale. So in that sense, I would very much like to see more of the platforms which are currently emerging, the national ones like in Finland or the Netherlands, also emerging in other European countries, or even something which goes into a direction where you kind of break up these small worlds into, you have different views on the content, saying you have a mega journal under the hood, and then you can build collections which are basically overlay collections, or name it journals and editors, but you have some flexibility over time. And this is something which is a little bit emerging, but I would say not as much as one would hope for. And I think these independent publishing through universities, societies, communities has much more room to explore and then see what's actually feasible. But the challenge will always be the commitments, the funding to make this really work in a scalable and in a long-term sense, and also to make it happen that this links up to larger infrastructures. So yeah, I think I would like to leave it at this. I mean, if you have any more specific points later, I mean, we have not so much time left, I think. So I think I hand over to the next speaker now.
Thank you very much. But you were the last, because we
Janka already covered. So
yeah, so thank you very much. So I will now invite you all to turn your cameras on. And before we enter in the discussion, I would like to indeed properly introduce Eloy Rodriguez, who joined us for this webinar. So Eloy is the chair of COAR, so the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, and is also the director of the University of Minho libraries. Eloy has been working on repositories, open access, and open science for over 15 or 18 years, I think you said, having established the University of Minho institutional repository back in 2003. And he's also coordinating the Portuguese National Initiative on Open Access, and that has been since 2008. At international level, he's been working on the coordination boards of several European-funded projects related with open science. And last but not least, in the context of this webinar, is a distinguished member of the EUA expert group on Science 2.0 and open science. So now that we have all of you, the first thing, because I'm aware of the time, the first thing I wanted to ask you is a question from the audience. And I think that all of you can actually take this from your own perspective, is can you recommend an open source, open access publication platform for universities to be in the control of their publications? So who would like to take this?
I can take if no one else wants to. But first of all, good afternoon to all, and it's also a pleasure to be participating on this webinar. And I'm also so Kathleen and I shared the core representation here, because Kathleen has had to leave, as I told you. Replying to the question, there are several softwares. Probably the most used one, and I think that's also a conclusion from an OAI Diamond study, is the Open Journal system, and that's also. And there is another software, kind of sister or brother software for managing book publishing, that was Open Monograph Press. But again, I think, and this is already kind of a point that maybe we can discuss more than the question of the software. There are other solutions. Probably these ones are the most common and most used, and they are good. But more than the software itself, I think it's the question of having the resources, mostly the human resources as well as technical resources to manage this. And this is, in many cases, this might be a challenge for individual institutions. So again, I think this is a point really that I'm thinking a lot on these days. This is also why sharing, partnering with others is really probably key for a viable and sustainable solution for community and institutional-led publishing.
Thank you very much, Eloy. Jadranka, you wanted to comment?
Yes, Eloy actually said everything important, but maybe just to mention that open journal system, yes, it's more used by a lot of journals, but it's somehow a reflection of such kind of system 10 years or 15 years ago. So we have new open source software supporting journal and book publishing, for example, like Janeway and some other players are appearing and are also widely used.
Okay. Birgit, do you want to add something on this?
And of course you might be very pragmatic in the sense that you say if you to put them on a DSpace repository, so as we do, and run a website and link to the repository and mint DOIs in addition or whatever. I mean, and for journals, I mean, there was one comment saying it's not open source. So yes, this is weird if someone thinks so, but no, it's open source. Yeah. But of course, this is and then commitment of, I mean, having another technical person in charge of running, setting up the infrastructure for a journal, which is not necessarily the same as if you have a repository person in place. So far, as it was mainly a pilot so far.
If I just make a comment on because it was Richard Dennis that made the original question that is now saying that OJS is not open source. Maybe there is a misunderstanding because PKP, they have software as a service service. So if you want to host your journal on their infrastructure, then you can have it as a service and you pay. But the software itself, you can download it and you can install it. So it's completely open source. For instance, I can tell you this is the software that we use to run our university press in Minho. So and it's completely open source.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have another question from the audience to all of you. Can you give an example of the best repositories for data policy and effective organization? And the person would like to compare their own policies and rules and use the best practices from others in the context of in a Ukrainian context. So best repositories for data and policy and effective organization. What would you say? That's a tricky one because
I'm not a jury on the Eurosong festival to vote for the best repository. But now seriously, what I can say is there is several frameworks and recommendations about best practices for repositories. So what I think you need to check is to those ones. Again, having being here on representing CORE, for instance, we have published in October last year a community framework for best practices in repositories that you can check to see what are the criteria, the requirements and the aspects that you can look at. There are other, for instance, there are certifications mechanisms for repositories like the Core Trust Seal. So there are several documents. I think we should not look at one repository because an excellent repository for its community may not be the excellent repository for your community. So you don't need to probably to check to individual repositories, but you need to check for criteria and for best practices. And again, there are several documents there where you can look at. I would recommend at least these two: the Core Community Framework for best practices and also the Core Trust Seal.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to echo this. I mean, the certification mechanisms typically give some guidance on the support services side as well. So it's really worth having a look, even if it's not the first thing you aim for. I mean, the certification is maybe a mid-term thing after you set up a repository. And also, I mean, turn to the ones who actually already run a service and have conversations. I mean, set up a short questionnaire and talk to them. I mean, this is the learning curve of does it work and where are the where are the points where it's getting a bit tricky in terms of linking perhaps also to other infrastructures, where you would like to add, DMPs or identifier services which are already available locally. I mean, in Göttingen we have a DSpace repository for publications, but also a Dataverse for the data, and then you have some other layers which are have to be connected with these infrastructures. So it's not a standalone thing, of course. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, Jadranka, do you have anything to add?
Very shortly, we have huge diversity when we speak about publications and storing publications. But when we come to research data, this diversity is really the high level. So it depends what we want to achieve with the research data. So every institution needs to decide and needs to choose between a simple solution like interdisciplinary repository storing information on publications and on research data and everything in the single repository, of course with a different metadata description, but somehow the infrastructure is the same. Or the more dedicated approach, for example, for social sciences and humanities, we have a cross-the repository in Croatia, and at that place you can, as a researcher, you can also get support and help from the cross-the people managing and maintaining cross-the. So it's everything about what we want to achieve, if we are looking for simple solution or more dedicated and detailed solution for research data.
Okay, thank you. I have another question from the audience, and this is related to monographs. Are there some international ethical norms or best practices for scholarly monograph publishing? So, Jadranka, well, it's for all of you because you are.
I'm not familiar with the special ethical standards related to the scholarly book publishing, but I think the same ethical standard as in journal publishing environment are applicable also to the book publishing environment. So, of course, there are ethical standards. We based our code of ethics, which is really for publishing part of the University of Zadar activities. We base this on COPE recommendation and guidance, but there are also, of course, the discipline, the biomedicine is somehow leading in this area, setting up ethical standards, and later on other disciplines are also adopting this. But so there are really several institutions and consortia setting up standards for publishing environment, and I'm sure that the one which are valid for journals are also applicable for book publishing.
Okay.
Yeah, I can also only echo what Jadranka said. I'm not aware of any specific guide, but this might indeed be something of interest for perhaps even for us to take on board. To think if there's any gap. I mean,
okay, Eloy.
No, I also it's not my area of expertise, but I think I would say that probably in general terms, what Jadranka said, so COPE could be a place to look for, but maybe also, as Birgitz suggested, maybe this is an opportunity to offer us to really look at it and develop something for book publishing.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for posting the links in the chat, Jadranka. I see there is a link in the chat also to the ORE, the Open Research Europe platform, of course. Now that I don't see other questions from the audience, I would like to share slides with you. We have, you can see, I think here, some results from the coming EUA Open Science Survey, the last one, 2020-2021. So these are data that will be published end of June, early July. And those data are coming from our respondents, which are mostly universities in Europe. We have 272 respondents, and what those respondents were said is that if you ask them if they have an institutional infrastructure for open access to research publications, you have 90% of the respondents of the surveyed institutions have their own repository, participate in a shared repository, or both. And so when we turn to journal hosting, the figure drops to 66%. So this is where you have like, yeah, it's like the blue plus the orange, okay, and the gray. So 66%, and then if it's yeah, only 57% of universities have their own platform, participate in a shared platform, or both in terms of Monograph hosting. So do you have any comments on those data? Anything that you would like to share with us?
If I may, this is really interesting, the chart, but if we would like to interpret this well, first we need to agree on what we consider institutional repository and what is shared repository and what should be stored in the repository. So if we talk about institutional repositories, they mostly store traditional publications such as journal articles, books, book chapters, conference, thesis and dissertation. This is predominant, for example, in Croatia. And in recent years, we have more and more repositories storing research data. And I really want to mention also importance of educational materials. Still, there are a number of digital materials that are not stored systematically, like reports, presentations, posters, and video recordings from conferences. So you are all the time depending on conference website, which usually disappears after a few years. Workshop materials, meeting minutes, legislative documents, patents, manuals, various multimedia materials, photos from different events, audio recordings, video. So I would like really to see institutional repository with a high level of interoperability, providing data exchange with all national and international repositories, archives, databases, as a digital representation of all activities and all types of outputs at the university. And by accepting such a concept, the notion of publishing would finally evolve and become much broader and more comprehensive. But when I would just like to finish, if you give me just 1 minute. When it comes to scholarly publishing and peer-reviewed publications, on top of repository, additional publishing service must be built, supporting the whole editorial process. And only with such a service that includes all the functionalities which are needed by editors, such as paper submissions, review process, proofreading, copy editing, publishing, and everything in between, for example, translations, we can talk about publishing platform, not just a repository. And I strongly believe such publishing services and related activities must be led by academic and research libraries. Yes, that's my 5 cents.
Thank you. That's a lot for 5 cents. Thank you very much. Eloy, anything you would like to add on this?
Yeah, two or three comments. One, I will pick up on these last comments from Jadranka. This vision of Jadranka, and I already shared this initially on the chat while Kathleen was talking. This is very much aligned with the vision and with the framework that we have proposed for on PubFair. That is a framework to publish any type of research output, to have it deposit or born into on a digital repository, and then on top of that, several types of services of reviewing, assessment, publishing, etc., dissemination can be built on. This is the vision that I really have, and I would like to see for this graph. I think there are some good news, and the good news is that there is already a lot of infrastructure out there. What I would really like to see is that of course the yellow part to get smaller, and probably I would like that so all the rest will be bigger, but probably more than look more blue. I really would like to see the orange and the gray areas grow, because again, for securing this interoperability, the level of compliance, the level of maturity, I really think that many individual institutions, even for their size, they will not have locally all the resources needed and all the knowledge needed to be an active actor on this ecosystem. But if they are using and sharing infrastructures and services, they can manage their content, they can manage their process of publishing, reviewing, disseminating, etc. But they have not to worry too much with the infrastructure part. So this is already very good news, but I would like even to be better, and especially on using shared infrastructures.
Thank you, Eloy. Birgitz?
Yeah, I mean, a challenge, even if you think it's a desirable idea, I mean, having this services on top of repositories where everything is stored is, of course, to get the commitment of reviewers. I mean, what makes you commit to review a paper? So, and is it the person who invites you, or is it the label, the branding of the journal who invites you? I mean, it's then still a thing which has to be solved. And if it's a platform which, I mean, turns up out of the blue, out of the initiative of a few researchers from a field, it might work or it might fail because it's either too small or not focused enough, or doesn't bring the incentives which you might have with, I mean, you always have to see, is it sufficient in terms of, because your researchers are so busy, and with a really be just happy with the, I mean, they take up the preprint sharing quite well over the last few years, and in particular in this situation of a crisis, but then they still want this layer of quality control, of course, and then you are back to a world where, yeah, you have to disrupt quite a bit so before things are there. I mean, in terms of what are the incentives which actually work? Is it, yeah, so just my little skepticism at this point in time.
Okay, so I'm aware of time. We are just like, it's time for us to close this webinar. Before we close, I think that a few keywords from the discussion today. I think it was very diverse-centered. Like, so you had from bibliodiversity to biodiversity, we had hamsters around, we had flowers, we had trees, but I think that keywords, at least that I would like to get out of this discussion, is that it's important to invest in the future. So it's really important to consider this as investment. What is important is that it's to share the different infrastructures and to increase the interoperability. It's important to have this diversity and to regain control. So I think that those are good keywords for this webinar. I would like to now close this webinar. Yeah, this one we did not have time to address this one. I would like to thank our panelists very, very much for having accepted our invitation, for the very clear presentations and oral statements, their comments and reactions. It was very interesting, I think. For the audience, I would like to thank our audience, of course. And as we said already, and we will keep saying in the coming webinars from this webinar series, I would like to thank the members of the expert group Open Science from EUA, the expert group Science 2.0 and Open Science, the members of the program committee of this webinar series, the group of negotiators, and the steering committee of the Read and Publish study. A special thank you note for our colleagues from the Secretariat, Aurélie Clenet, Caroline Marissal, and Lennart Stoy, who is not a EUA member or a EUA colleague anymore, but who definitely had a great role in shipping this webinar series. The webinar series continues in June, and you see here a list of coming webinars of EUA. You can check the website to get additional information and to register. And with this, I thank you all. I wish you a very good afternoon, and I close this webinar.